This year, I survived a trip to Big Bear, California. And I say I survived it not because it was dangerous, but because while some part of me came back the same, a big part of me came back very different. The parts that came back survived the change. The change happened in 3 parts. First, surviving literally. Second, thriving artistically. Third, rooting spiritually. When I say that I survived it not because it was dangerous, I don't mean that it was safe. This was the most independently made and executed decision I have ever made. No one told me to do it. No one suggested it. In fact, I was uninvited from a similar trip that I was going to go to. My friend invited me to go to Yosemite with his childhood friends, but then he came back and said, "Actually, I'm so sorry. My friends wanted to make this a boys' trip, so you can't come." So I decided to go somewhere anyway. I am not going to sit there on 4th of July wishing I was a guy. This was the furthest I have ever gone on my own. Just raw distance, it takes about 5 to 9 hours to get there by bus. And to be clear, no one goes there by bus. This was also the trip with the most screw-up potential that I've ever had. First, I got stuck on 4th of July in San Bernardino with no buses running and no hotel or place to stay overnight. Luckily, an Uber took me up to the mountain. Even though it took me sitting through the Uber driver being very weirdly curious about just how much I like girls and being weirdly entertained by it. I got to the hostel and there was no cell service and no Wi-Fi service. But luckily, there was a guy sitting outside of there who very reluctantly but still gave me the password. The guy that was sitting outside who gave me reluctantly the password was a 20-year-old guy from Florida who got a great kick from intimidating me. To be fair, I made the mistake of joking that as a woman, I feel safer having things that have camo on them because maybe that would let people leave me alone or have a second thought before, I don't know, kidnapping me. He didn't like that, and he said that this is precisely why I am going to get kidnapped. He said, you are going to be walking down the road and they're going to see you in camo and they're going to take you in their car and kidnap you. From overhearing that guy's conversation with his friends, I learned that he absolutely despised women, especially his ex-girlfriend, and honestly most of the world. Well, joke's on him because he blew his chance to go watch the fireworks. Last night at the hostel, I was completely alone. That guy left. Thankfully, he did not come back and kidnap me, or worse, if even one of those screw-ups went slightly worse, who knows if I would be here. Also, I learned to ride the bike again, even though the last time that I rode it was in Florida in 2012 and I got hit by a car. I did not fall a single time here. Now I own my own bike here in Texas. I used the bike that I own here promptly to run into a wall. Unintentionally. This was the trip when I finally used my large camera. Finally, there were no people around. It's just me, and even if anybody thought anything, it was still a town with beautiful nature, a lot of tourists, so I would perfectly blend in, and I could just be an NPC whose default behavior is to be taking pictures of stuff around. I really liked observing everything there. I feel like I was really in the moment. The level of awareness I felt can be compared to getting a tattoo. Here are some things I noticed. 1. The nature. 2. The animals. 3. The people. 4. The infrastructure. 1. The nature. Obviously, the tall trees. Trees should be tall, like 10, 15 times taller than a person. 2. The animals. The zoo was so cool and very different from the San Diego Zoo, which I still love. All the animals were native, taken in for rehabilitation, and released once they got better. Three, the people. A very interesting mix of country rednecks and liberals. They may argue about politics and wave their flags, but on the radio you will always hear that taking care of the environment is important. Be it because of climate change or your love of fishing and hunting. The biggest 4th of July event is thrown by the local church, and their blueberry pie is out of this world. 4. The infrastructure. Everything is slightly old. You can tell that to live there, you need to be able to maintain everything yourself. You don't have good service, you can't go there by electric car, old people need to have enough dollar bills to afford a bus ride down to the city Walmart, and you're far enough from civilization where you know that if you get snowed in, it is up to you to have a radiator and water and a snow shovel. You either figure it out on your own or you build a connection with your neighbors who could help you. Technology, again, old everything but also new everything. Old cars but well maintained. Tractors, newish but standing still. On top of being a survival and an artistic experience, this was also an experience for becoming more spiritually stable or rooted. Everywhere around, I felt the spirit of Sable. It's a video game that I was playing at the time. The idea came to me of connecting this trip to that video game when it was scorchingly hot in San Bernardino and I was stuck, and all I could really do was listen to music and think, and I just look around at the mountains to which I'm trying to get to, and I think, hey, the video game is set in a mountain desert, and I'm in a mountain desert, so let me put on some music from the video game. And it was perfect. It's this weird, super satisfying mix of old and sci-fi, and I'm a sucker for that. I found an observatory, a solar observatory. Getting to it was a whole journey because I had to go all the way around the lake to get to it. I didn't even know it was possible because I thought you couldn't make it there without a car. But once I made it off the bike trail and I saw it, it was the most beautiful, satisfying experience I have ever had. I feel like the observatory was my crush on the trip. I wanted to go back there. I wanted to keep looking at it. I would look at it across the lake. I already had a type, with me kind of starting the astronomy club in high school and wanting to be an astrophysicist at some point until I realized I was really bad at physics. But damn, this was something else. This experience just solidified my feeling like I was in Sable. The whole town felt like it was stuck in kind of the olden days, but the observatory was so futuristic that it felt like it was going to be there 1,000 years from now. When this whole town is gone, when there's nothing but the mountains and the observatory. Reading Solaris. This was the second Russian sci-fi book that I read this year. Solaris was written in 1961, and it's about a man who goes to a planet that then tries to communicate with him by sending him illusions of his dead wife. The way the book describes the sentient ocean is so impressive and horrifying and mind-boggling, but you also can't be as scared of it because you are just too curious about what it's trying to say. Something about seeing the stars more clearly while you're walking between two empty fields, being at higher elevation, and thinking about this book made me feel so much more connected and somehow rooted. Like somehow the external environment and my internal environment finally synchronized. It felt like something clicked just a little bit more. And like there were roots inside of me that grew just a little bit deeper. when I came back, I did feel very, very different. On the bus approaching San Diego, a city that I lived in for 6 years by then, everything felt and looked very strange and unfamiliar because it felt like I was looking at it through a different person's eyes. I think the experience of the trip had two effects on me. First, I finally cut off my attachment to San Diego. Living off that backpack for a week, I was like, oh, I could do this again, and for a while. And I don't need a perfectly decorated apartment to maintain my mental stability and a sense of self. And secondly, the fact that I got back safe and the fact that I booked this trip in the first place made me stop seeing myself as this helpless woman. At least for that week, that stupid misogynistic voice in my head finally stopped. And now I had at least one more piece of evidence that I can do whatever I want. And I don't need to be a guy to do that. I did not come back the same. A lot of bullshit was left there. But the parts that did come back were the parts that knew that I could handle it.